Reggie, we know that Paul didn't have any difficulties in writing to people that he had never met, but I guess I'm curious, how much of the letter is actually written to address problems in Ephesus, or do we have a sense on how much of it is written to maybe a wider audience than just that city?
Well, Ephesus, Rob, or the letter to the Ephesians is a great example of how Paul can be both very specific to a particular situation and global at the same time. Here in this letter, when he talks about the church, he's not just talking about a local congregation. Like he writes the letter to the churches of Galatia. Here, he's talking about the church universal and what its significance is. And he talks in Ephesians, at the end of Ephesians 2, about how there had been this foundation-laying work of the apostles and the prophets, and then how there is this edifice that is building that is beyond the particularities of any specific local church. And the whole way that he paints the work of the ministry of the gospel in the church, where Christ is giving gifts to church officers so that they can equip the church, or church members, for their work of service, so that the bride can be built. And the bride of Christ is this larger conception of the church, sort of more the church universal. And the way that he addresses larger patterned relationships, like family relationships, husbands and wives, parents and children, masters and slaves, and talks in a more general fashion. Like in 1 Corinthians, when he talks about worship, he's talking about the nitty-gritty of how he wants them to relate to each other, specifically in Corinth. You know, they've got these divisions among themselves, where the poor are not getting to the table at the same time as everybody else. They're not, therefore, rightly discerning the body. They're breaking the body of Christ up, and the Lord is slamming people. And people are using their spiritual gifts to exalt themselves rather than each other. And he's telling them, in terms of they need to understand in that particular situation, you need to edify each other. Now, those are principles that it's pretty easy to infer for everybody. But he's really addressing that particular situation. Here in Ephesus, he is talking about worship in this larger sense of coming together to let the word of Christ, and it's easy to blend Ephesians 5 with Colossians 3, because in both of these cases he is extrapolating about the nature and shape of worship, where the word of Christ dwells among us richly, and we teach and instruct one another with psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, and where thanksgiving is in our hearts. And the whole thing on spiritual warfare, he's painting across this broad canvas. And I think he intends for this letter in particular, kind of inspired by the juices that got flowing as he wrote the letter to the Colossians, to help the church, however long history goes, wherever God raises up a church, here's what our life together should be like. And it's one of the things that makes Ephesians so exciting, and it's so, so very popular, is that the right word?
Yeah.
So powerful in the church, so special to people over the ages. We kind of sense, oh yeah, he's talking to all of us here.